Hello, thank you for joining us. Papa Yago Rescue House here with you tonight to introduce you to Dawn Levine. And she has graciously agreed to join us tonight to talk to you about a trust, your will, how you prepare for your, should you need to prepare for your
Recording in progress.
bird. Sorry, it's recording. Message in my ear. Yes, so it's good for birds, dogs, cats. It's for your pet companions, and we want to make sure that our long-lived pets are taken care of in the event of our demise or that we're incapacitated in any sort of way. And so I asked Dawn, because Dawn Levine, she is here in Marietta with us. She lives and works in Marietta, Georgia, and she has uh, been with us in this area for a long time, and she's a graduate of Emory University School of Law, and she has her own business within walking distance of her home. I'm so envious. And she, yeah, right. It's so cool. And the name of her business is Georgia Wills Trust and Probate Firm LLC, and she's will share her contact information afterwards so that you can reach out to Dawn should you want to contact her to help you be prepared. And I'm all about being prepared, especially when we're dealing with issues of abandonment, or abandonment meaning there's no one to take care of your animals, and so they go to the shelter. Somebody has to be called in, and that's not something we desire for our birds or our dogs, cats, fish. We don't want that for them. So Dawn has some dogs of her own, so she's a pet person, and she also has a son and a husband. I guess I should mention that. Um, but welcome, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining us. I just, I really appreciate you taking the time out on a Friday night, no less. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. Um, we're just going to kick off this interview with one of our questions um, that, you know, we know that here in Georgia, parrots are considered property. And that seems to, uh, that affects the way the laws are written and how we write for their afterlife, for our afterlife care. And so, what I would like to know from you is, um, what is the first thing we should do um, to be prepared for that eventual demise, end of life? It sounds so tragic.
Sure. So, well, you're right. It could be death, it could be incapacity, and those both of those contingencies do need to be covered. And really, the first step is to just get started. I have run into lots of people who think they have to figure out all the answers to all the questions before they reach out to the estate planning attorney, and that's really backwards. That can result in someone postponing doing anything for a long time because they might get stuck on
Mm-hmm.
something and the attorney could easily help them work.
Mm-hmm.
We've had tons of experience with situations with problematic situations or difficult things to work through, and an attorney can give you suggestions on things that work for other people. We've had a variety of people who wanted to care for a variety of animals. We've done planning for turtles and horses and cats and dogs and everything in between. And so if you've got something that you need to work through, we can probably help you figure it out. Just need to start the conversation. So making that first call is really the first step, and then everything else kind of falls into place.
Well, and that's a good point is making the first step. And a lot of people want to know what the first step is. But before we go there, I was wondering if you could tell us what the difference is between a living trust, um, a will, a trust, a pet trust. I think there's one more that I'm missing, but can you tell me what those differences are so we're talking the right glossary?
Sure. So a lot of people understand what a will is. It's a document that says where your possessions are going to go after your passing and who's going to be in charge.
Hmm.
A trust, a living trust, is very much a will substitute. It does all those same things, but it doesn't require any interaction with the court. It's a much more rapidly deployed document. It could be deployed and used to care for your parent or and other loved ones if you were incapacitated or if you passed away. So a trust straddles that line and takes care of you and others during your lifetime and can also take care of them after your passing, again, without any need to visit the court. In addition to that, there is a document that used to be called a living will. It's called Advanced Directive for Healthcare now. That's going to designate who's in charge of healthcare. That can be important if you're incapacitated. So we've got someone who can speak for you and get information so that somebody could step right in to care for your parent if you were going to be incapacitated for a longer period of time. And then there's also a financial power of attorney, which again operates during your lifetime and covers things that might be outside of the reach of a trustee or an executor. So it will allow someone to communicate to Social Security, the IRS, all of those government agencies.
Hmm.
They won't talk to a trustee well, they would talk to an executor, but they won't talk to a trustee. But if you're here and incapacitated, they would talk to the financial power of attorney.
Okay, so you hit on a really good point because I have always been nervous because we've gotten calls from hotels, hospitals, saying that the person is unreachable, and they just happen to know that there was an animal, a bird, that was attached to them, but a lot of times they don't know because we've had to go and pull birds out of homes that they died in the hospital. So that one article that you were talking about, the living will or the advanced directive. The advanced directive is something that is that something that is can reside with the your doctor, or where does that document reside that if they're in the hospital, if they keep them, they've been admitted for a car accident and they're unconscious. How do we get that information communicated to the hospital who knows they're there versus everybody else?
So the advanced directive, the Georgia version, has room to list 3 people in it to act as alternates to make healthcare decisions for you if you can. And the people that are listed in the document need to have a copy of it in advance so that if you're in an accident, they've already got a copy of it.
Okay.
And
So it's the people. It's the people that work that will need to know that information.
That's one place to keep it. And
Okay.
then you would also, I usually, if you're going on a trip, I tell people to take one with you while you're away. And we make extra copies so they can give one to their primary care physician. And then you need to have on your person contact information, emergency contact information. So you can list the people, just a little card in your wallet listing is in your advance directive. So as soon as you got to the hospital, they would know who to call. And I would also recommend, if you have animals at home that would be at significant risk if you did not come home on time, there's a place in the advance directive for additional statements. So you could list, I have pets in the home, and this is the person to contact to come and pick them up if something happens. So that the information about taking care of the pets and who's going to do it is right there in the document. So your healthcare agents, people you pick know, and any doctor or anyone else looking at it would also.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, what, uh, before I go on to the next question about picking an executor, what, just out of curiosity, what document would you recommend starting off with first? That allows us to make sure we're covered right away for information sharing.
So, information sharing
Like if
in
I,
regards to,
so if I'm picked up for I had a heart attack, what document? I'm not dead yet. I'm not dead yet. And I need to be able to communicate this. So I'm thinking that's the document. But what document should I start with, in terms of making sure that I get that done ASAP?
so definitely the advanced directive is one that you want to have in place so that you know who's going to jump in and communicate for you if for some reason you can't. Typically, when we're doing documents here, we do them in groups. There are several that are very important, and we do them all at the same time.
Mm.
It doesn't take any longer to do them all at the same time. So, for example, if you were going to create a trust, we would create the trust, the power of attorney, the advance directive. All of those things would be created at the same time.
Mhm.
They all serve different functions, and they all could be critical depending on the situation. So I wouldn't recommend doing it piecemeal. I would recommend doing them all as a group. If you are not going to do a trust and you're just going to do a will, then it will the power of attorney be instructed. I think a trust is a good fit for someone who has a parrot because they are so long-lived. That's a document that can last up to 360 years in Georgia. So it could certainly last long enough to take care of that parrot's entire lifetime.
That's the first time
And the
I've heard
other,
the years, because trying to track down how many years that is has been very difficult. So I'm glad that you answered that one question I've had for years.
yes, there are some states where a trust can go on forever, and we will probably be one of them, but we will probably be one of the last to go there. So right now, 360 years is the maximum in Georgia, and that's plenty of time to take care of a variety of different animals. It's even a tortoise
Right.
is still within the time frame. So you would be hard pressed to come up with a scenario where you couldn't take care of the pets with that time frame. But the other advantage to a trust, when you've got an animal like a parrot, they're very unique. And so they can't go just any old place.
Right.
They have to go somewhere specific, and they need to go quick. So, there's a million people with cats and dogs. There's plenty of people who know how to take care of them, but you need a rapid transition to somebody who knows what to do when you've got a parrot.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of special needs. They're very social. They are very smart. They need a lot of stimulation. They can't just go any old place. Um, a trust provides a very rapid transition. So quickly, very quickly, you've got somebody with authority to transfer the parent to the caregiver. Very quickly, you've got the trustee access to the funds to provide support for that parent while it's in that transition phase. If you want to rely on a will is going to require probate
Mm.
carried out. And
Mhm.
so the probate process can be very slow. So you put together some paperwork, you submit it to the judge looks things over, there may be ads that need to go in the newspaper, they're going to reach out to closest relatives to see if they want to object. It can be very, very slow. So 3 months to 6 months is very common. If there was a loved one who wasn't happy about the money you're setting aside for your parent, that might slow things down even more.
Mhm.
So a will for such a long-lived animal with such unique needs is probably not a good fit. A trust is going to be a better fit, I think, for such a unique.
Mhm. Um, and that brings up a good point is how do you pick an executor for this trust? Much less a will, but I mean, I try to recommend people for trust for a couple of different reasons, but how do you pick an executor? I mean, because I don't think you're just picking a family member or a friend. What's an ideal criteria for an executor?
So it could be family, could be friends. They might be suitable. You're looking for certain traits. You want somebody, obviously, who's honest to a fault. You want someone who's very detail oriented, and you want someone who is not a procrastinator. We've got a parent, they've got special needs. We need somebody who's going to be dynamic and jump right in and do what we need to do. So you need someone who is not a procrastinator. Now, this person does not have to be a stock market whiz. They don't have to have unique real estate knowledge. They just need to be smart enough to recognize when they need help, get help.
Mm-hmm.
I will say also that it's very important to think about the person that you might be choosing and think about how they feel about you. Are they just going to collapse from grief if something happens to
Yeah.
you? We need them to be able to operate even if you're not here. And a lot of people fail to consider that. The other thing you need to think about is their values. Do they resent how much you spend on your parent? Do they hate birds? Do they think that that is a silly pet to have? We don't want someone in charge of the checkbook who has objections to how we live our lives and the creatures that we care about. We
Mm-hmm.
want someone who's going to carry out our instructions without judgment. So thinking about those things is very important. We're running into more and more people who really don't have anybody trustworthy in their immediate
Right.
sphere to draw upon. So we do have way more people who are deciding on nominating a neutral. So attorneys and accountants make great candidates for that. They're very rules oriented. They have a license that depends on them continuing to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And usually their license to practice is very valuable. They're not going to cut any corners in order to jeopardize that. So those can be very good candidates. I will say that in the future, in the not so distant future, I'm expecting there to be a class of private fiduciaries. Someone who's in charge of the checkbook is referred to as a fiduciary. I'm expecting that niche to be filled.
Mm-hmm.
The baby boom generation is large. They have a tremendous need for that. New services are coming on board all the time. They already do this in other states. So I'm expecting that we'll see this in the future, not so distant future. But right now, we don't have a category of private fiduciaries, except for these professionals like attorneys and accountants who do this regularly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know. conflict of interest, is there any words of warning there?
Yes. So, you're going to be selecting someone to be in charge of the checkbook, and you're also going to be choosing a caregiver for your parent if something happens to you. A lot of people will choose to have different people for those, so there is some checks and balances
Right.
involved. And I will also say it's important to consider where any leftover resources are going to go. So you're going to have a caregiver, and you're going to have some money set aside for the care of your parent. And there's going to be the trustee and other assets that may go only for the care of the parent or else. But you want to be very careful about naming the caregiver and or trustee as also beneficiaries.
Right.
That creates an incentive to cut corners. So my recommendation for caregiver is don't leave the leftover funds to that person. Instead, set aside a small stipend for them that's given out every year that they take care of the parent. And then the residue, so if we set aside some money for the care of the parent, and the parent does not consume it all during the parent's lifetime, then the leftovers should go somewhere else, to a rescue group, to a different person, somewhere else, not to that caregiver. So there's no incentive to cut corners. Same thing for trustee, with some exceptions. If you had a very close family member and they were going to be a beneficiary anyway, and they don't have any objections to your parent, they love your parent as much as you do, then it could be okay to have them as a beneficiary and a trustee. That's a conversation to have with the estate planning attorney, just to talk through potential conflicts of interest to make sure we're not setting up any pitfalls. And you can also, another way, if you want that person to be a beneficiary, but we don't want to have any perverse incentives, you can also create some checks and balances by saying they have to provide an annual report to some other person, so that somebody is keeping an eye on things who doesn't have a stake in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's the most important part to, make sure or impart there is that making sure that they don't have a stake, which kind of leads me to the next question to you is how do you advise your constituents, your clients, to put aside how much to set aside in a trust because along with the instructions because I don't get a lot of calls that say how much does it cost truly if we went if I vetted the bird every year and you paid for food and fresh food and any supplements and a replacement cage every 7 to 10 years, purchase toys every month, how much would that look like? How do you advise people when they say, well, how much do I set aside? Or do they put aside a lump and then you draw from that lump? Which you still probably should know what that should look like for a dog or a turtle or a parrot. How do you advise them on that?
Sure. So that is a very challenging question. I think one thing that might illustrate there's a lot of creativity that can be put into this, and the estate planning attorney can certainly walk you through it. So we had a client who did rescue for dogs, and she had this fluctuating number of dogs in her household, and she wanted to provide for all the dogs who happened to be here at the time of her passing. We had no idea what that number might be or what their healthcare needs were going to be. So for her, we wrote a formula. So the trustee was to calculate how much to set aside to kind of keep that can down the road a little bit. We looked at the number of pets, and the instructions were the trustee was going to have each of them assessed by her vet to make a prediction on longevity, assess any special healthcare needs, and to come up with a ballpark number. So we're going to use the ASPCA suggested annual expenditure for a dog, and we were going to use the special report from the vet, and we were going to use that as a baseline annual. We were going to multiply it by a fudge factor so that there was some cushion in there, and then we were going to adjust it for inflation. The trustee would set aside that amount for each of the dogs. So that one was a little complicated. Most people opt for something a little simple. So for most people, they can either look at what the experts say is the annual cost. The research that I did said $1,000 to $2,000. To me, that sounds kind of conservative. They probably would actually spend more than that on an annual basis, considering that all of the things that you cataloged. So the best method, in my opinion, is to look at what do you actually spend
Right.
on your parrot each year, and then take that, add a fudge factor, and the adjustment for inflation, and then that's the amount. So you don't have to calculate it right now. You could say flat amount, $200,000, or whatever the number might be, or you could, like I said, refer to a separate writing. After a recent change in Georgia law, you could say that the trustee is going to calculate the amount according to my instructions in the separate writing, and then you could write up a formula or the numbers that make sense to you. On the note of that separate writing is an excellent place for you to create a set of instructions on how to take care of your parrot. So parrots have their idiosyncrasies just like people do. They like to shred paper, or they like to ring bells, or whatever the case may be. Your parrot has all sorts of things that they really like, things that they really don't, foods that they like, treats that they like. Create a narrative of all of that information so that your caregiver can step right into your shoes and not have to deal with a lot of trial and error. Sometimes our parrot may have a recurring medical issue, and create information about that. This is what it is, this is what it looks like, and this is what you do. So you don't have to try to figure it all out all over. That separate writing can be changed as often as you need to without going back to see the attorney, and it's enforceable. So those instructions are very important. It's an excellent tool for your caregiver and also the trustee in figuring out how much they're set aside.
Mm-hmm. So that's all really good feedback, because I have to say that I run into situations where people haven't taken their birds to the vet, or realize that as their bird ages, the cost also tend to increase when they become heart patients just like we do. They need heart medication just like we do. High blood pressure, the whole 9 yards. They suffer it all just like we do. So that said, what actions can we take now to secure or to protect their future as much as possible? Aside from the normal get in touch with you about all these different documents, because of course that's the first action. But it sounds to me like you were suggesting going ahead and building those narratives on paper.
Absolutely.
It sounds like that's what you're saying, is that might be the next set of actions, but also to track the spending. Because I don't know that people really understand what they spend on their bird, because they kind of, I mean, it's my baby, it's my friend, it's my girlfriend, it's my companion. So we have a tendency to overlook until we get the sticker shock of a vet visit. But other than that, they're all good. So it sounds like I hear two different actions. One is to write the narrative down, to start writing down, um, maybe paper wise, but electronically too. Storing that is something pretty important, where to store that. But writing the narrative of how they live, what they eat, when they sleep, when the last time they've been to a vet, and updating those narratives, because birds age, they change just like people do. And then the next is to get the documentation, uh, get ready for the documentation by understanding how much your bird costs. Um, so we
Absolutely.
so we can put in a scale. Um,
Mhm.
I can tell you that the numbers aren't really out there to support how much it costs to raise a parrot. I can tell you how much that costs because I live it, uh, every day, every month, every year, um, and I can help them with that. But if they don't know a rescue, or if I'm not in their area, vetting costs are different. But and maybe that's not so much an issue when we're talking about localization, because we're talking. I know how much vets cost here versus, say, Cincinnati. So that might be different. I don't know. But is there any other actions to help best prepare for our pets in general?
I definitely think selecting caregivers is going to be critical for
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
equally important thing is the caregivers. Because parrots live so long, you need a long, robust, as long as you can come up with a list of people who could serve. And it can be really challenging when all of my friends are my age. So you need to start thinking outside the box a little bit about who would be suitable for caregivers. And so if you can come up with 6 alternates, great, list them all, because the first person might be sick and the second person might have passed away at the same time as you. And the third person might be going through an ICU. So list as many people as you can come up with. And if you can't come up with a long enough list to suit you, then start turning over all the stones. Talk to your friends about people that they know that they might be able to introduce you to who would be suitable. Talk to a rescuer, talk to your vet, talk to your pet sitter, talk to your family. There's lots of people that you could talk to who may be able to introduce you to someone that you get to know who would be suitable. Want to make sure that you're with these people. Want to make sure they're suitable for a parent, but definitely try to come up with as many names.
Okay, that's a good point because I didn't even, you know, I for parrots, they do have a tendency to get passed around, and I'd like to see that practice not end, but be taken a little more seriously because these are very sentient beings. They understand loss. They need time to mourn. And a lot of people don't understand what that looks like. So they see behavior. And I, but that's a very, it's a very good point that we need to, because not all rescues, I mean, they're all full. They're all full. It doesn't mean we don't want to help. But it doesn't mean we still can't help, even though we may not be taking our bird. We can help provide oversight. We can provide support. We can provide, um, anti-service, because we are antis to a lot of birds that have never come through our rescue technically, but they're friends of the rescue, and we would do care deeply about what happens to them. But um, knowing, meeting people and socializing your bird with them would go a long way to helping that situation. So that's excellent point. I totally would have glossed over that one. So thank you for that point. So the one thing that scares me, though, we got to talk about. It's scary because I know a lady. Uh, I felt she was young. She passed away, and her bird went into probate for over a year. And that bird had to live at a vet's office, not come to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's not ideal for a bird, much less a cockatoo. And she's a wonderful bird. They're all wonderful. I don't know why I say that, because they're all wonderful. But they're very social. They're very loving, and they're accustomed to a home life. They're not accustomed to an office downstairs where they're safe, but they're out of mainstream. Probate scares me about this because she had a trust. And she left the bird to us, and she left money for us, but we didn't see Samantha for. Oh, I shouldn't say that name. No, just kidding.
You didn't say the last name. It's okay.
Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't have a last name, but she's. But it took her a year to get to us. So how do we prevent that probate? Because it's like it's like a bad word to me, probate. How do we narrow that down to ensure that our bird isn't going into that same situation? Because some birds wouldn't have handled it as well as she did.
So I don't know exactly what went wrong with that particular situation, but I can probably guess. We do probate here as well, so we see how that plays out when that's the only option. We do see lots of trusts created, but there was never any effort to get everything where it needed to be so that the trust could do its job. A trust needs to be funded. Certain assets need to be transferred into the trust during your lifetime.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. And we see that very frequently. There are lots of attorneys out there who can create a trust, but there's also lots of them who don't know how to fund it. They don't know that you need to. They don't know how to do it properly. The client doesn't know they need to. They don't know how to do it. That's a very important second step once you create a trust, is to get the assets where they belong. Some of them need to go in right away. Some of them need to be set to flow there automatically if you pass away. So that care in that second step is extremely important so that we can avoid the probate. The trust can't do its job unless the assets are within its four walls. And don't forget to transfer your parent into the trust. So
Yes.
that can be done with a simple assignment. We do it all the time. We usually attach a picture. It's great fun, actually. We enjoy it. So we create the assignment, we attach the picture, and it's almost like we get to meet them. So we've done it for horses, cats and dogs, turtles, and all sorts of things. So that's an important step. Real estate, also very suitable to go into the trust. Some things have tax attributes so that they cannot go into the trust during your lifetime, but they still need to be coordinated with a correctly worded beneficiary designation, or they might need to be retitled so that they're in the trust. So we help clients figure all of that out, and then we gently nag them until it's all done.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, that's a very good point, is to move the bird into the trust, because that was the other point I wanted to make sure that we got across tonight. Sorry. Are you available for consultations for our following?
Yes, so we do no obligation, no cost consultations for estate planning. So we gather some basic information, and then you have a conversation with the attorney to kind of flesh out what your goals are, what you want to do. And then the attorney, there are three attorneys here who do this. So we give you a recommendation or two that will accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. It's flat fee, so we give you the price in writing. And then if you like the recommendation, say yes, and we get to work for you. But if you don't like any of the recommendations, just keep shopping.
Okay, that sounds fair, because you're building a relationship with you as well, which is very important that we know and trust the people that we do business with, who also have so much of our personal lives in their hands, because we certainly don't want to have a situation where we have a bird sitting in probate, um, or or worse yet, euthanized because there was no one available to take care of the bird. Economic euthanasia is a thing, unfortunately, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Um, so let's see if we have any questions, because we're getting close to the quarter where we start to find out, um, or wrap things up. So, do we have any questions? Let me see. No questions at this time. Give them 30 seconds to. So it looks like our audio has been a little off. I think there's been a little bit of hearing issues. I hope. So we're waiting for a couple people to pipe in because we're on a little bit of a delay.
Oh, okay.
So, so while we're wait for questions to come in, what um, what has been the longest? I don't know if I'm asking too much, but what is the oldest animal that you've included in a trust?
Well, we had a turtle that I believe was 20 or 30. They can live a long time as well. Our tortoise, actually. I would say probably one of the horses were the oldest that we've ever served and taken care of. I don't know, it could be the turtle, it could be the horse. I'm not quite sure about that because I can't remember if the tortoise was 30 or 20.
Yeah, they have unique long lives. It's funny that our prey animals seem to have longer lives. I don't know if that's because of what they're eating or not, but that might be worth researching. Um, but yeah, horses can uh, give some birds a run for their money in terms of longevity. Um, uh, Another thing is that I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that they could contact you at Georgia Wills Trust and Probate Firm LLC, located in Marietta, Georgia. And what was that phone number?
It's 770-795-4992.
Okay, great. And
And we're just a word of warning, we're very pet friendly here. So if you come to see us, you're very likely to see a couple of dogs.
yes. Well, there are worse things than getting, having a dog or a cat to pet while you're talking about some very serious things.
Yes,
It's a little bit of duress, a little stress. People worry about the cost. That's scary for all of us. I gotta say that The cost of everything has been, I mean, come on, who ever thought we were going to see eggs at $6 a dozen?
I have no
Not
idea.
not
I
in my
just don't
lifetime.
know.
No.
And a lot of people are thinking about getting chickens for that reason. I would be one of them.
Yeah, I would just like to humbly remind you that there is an avian flu pandemic, and it's not looking good. And they're saying that they said that that's the reason why their eggs are so expensive. But I just read an article yesterday. I haven't gotten to share that publicly with our constituents and our followers. Is that come to find out, FTC is being challenged to find out why they're price gouging on eggs, because apparently they weren't affected so badly with the avian flu. That only 6% of their laying chickens were culled, euthanized due to avian flu. So yeah, I'm very interested in finding out about that because it's just one more vote for vegan people because I'm telling you, I mean, price gouging on and they're at I mean, like, I had no idea the egg industry was such a $1 billion industry. I had no idea. 500 billion? I mean, come on. I'm in the wrong freaking business.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, do we have any questions? Because I think we have a question. I can't see it. Can you see it, Bree? I can't see it.
No questions.
No question. Okay, we don't have any questions. We were that good, Dawn. We were that good that they got. Of course, they're going to have questions about specific items for them and their situations, and it's really about Taylor making a plan of action
Yes.
and a set of documents that cover your home, your animals, your loved ones. Not necessarily in that order, but pets come first. No, just kidding. I think that they should, but that's just me.
One question come in.
We do have a question. Sorry.
It just says, do you recommend having multiple potential trustees/caregivers in case the designated one doesn't work out?
Well, that's a really good question, Nikki. So Nikki wants to know, and I'm paraphrasing. Does she wants to know, is it recommended to have multiple trustees to oversee?
At the same time or in succession?
Well, I don't think in succession because obviously you want to back up, but like a trustee who would oversee the care of your animals versus the rest of your estate. They kind of partner. I don't know if that's a thing, but you know, because so many people don't know about parrots, so they don't understand that sitting at a vet's office for a year probably isn't a good thing, but your bird experienced trustee would. So maybe it's a partnership. What do you think about that?
Well, one thing to consider, I'm not a huge fan of co-trustees because that means every time a check has to be signed, they both have to be there. But I will say that there is a different dynamic when you have a caregiver for the parrot and trustee in charge of the checkbook. The parrot is still a trust asset, and so the trustee still has an obligation to support the parrot as a trust asset. So the caregiver, as the custodian, has some rights to enforce that if there was some sort of issue. And trustees can be removed. If you have a trustee who goes rogue, they're not following the instructions, they won't distribute any money, You can have them removed. That's a last resort. That can be messy,
Hmm.
but the threat of removal is usually enough to get them. So they can't just do any old thing they want to do. The custodian of the parent is going to have some rights to enforce what's supposed to be done for the parent economically.
Okay, so if okay, so in one of the situations that I had, we had the executor says, "Well, she left you the bird, um, and and money. So there's no longer an asset. So that really doesn't sound like that was a trust. That sounds like it was a will. Would you say that?
I would agree.
Okay, good. So when we're talking about a trust situation, the oversight goes on through the bird's life so that they can ensure that the bird is receiving the care that they should be getting. And the executor should know, or the trustee should know what that looks like. They should know to ask for pictures because unfortunately we live in a world that will does not regard animals as high as we do and may keep the bird
Yes.
alive longer to receive more funds or something like that. I don't know. It's hard for me to think
Yes.
that nefarious kind of thinking, but let's be real here. Um, like I'm going to pull out the interview. Let's be real here. People cheat the system all the time. So we want somebody who's
Yes.
going to, you know, not armchair quarterback the caregiver, but ensure, especially if they're given over to a rescue or a sanctuary, and put eyes on that bird because, because there's only so much you can do, especially if the sanctuary is like a sanctuary off on the west coast, and she wouldn't let anybody on the properties, and she dies, and all the other birds subsequently die. That's a really tragic story and unfortunate. Yeah, yeah. So, but that's an extreme. We're talking about the middle ground where, I want my bird to go and fly and have friends and be free. They want a sanctuary. They don't want a rescue. So a lot of sanctuaries will require a lot of upfront money for them to go in. I don't know if they have sanctuaries for horses, but if not, I really would love to have one. Um, but Brianna says I can't have any more animals. But anyway, so I have to say, is it the same thing as a trustee calling up or a report given? Like, is it monthly? Is it 6 months? Is it yearly? How does that usually work? Do you know?
So it's tailored very much to the client's personal preferences, and you raise an excellent point. The caregiver has some rights to enforce things with the trustee, but the trustee also needs to be checking up on the bird to make sure it's still thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And you may want to have a mechanism for the trustee to remove the parrot from that home.
Right.
If you have a caregiver and they develop Alzheimer's, the parent doesn't need to stay there. So you do need some checks and balances between those two roles. The checks and balances for a trustee due to incapacity, that's a well-trodden path. That's clear
Good.
within the law. But you can draft something specifically for the checks and balances on the custodian to make sure that there's still an appropriate place for the parent. So, if they adopted 12 feral cats, that's probably also not a good situation. So the trustee needs to keep a close eye on that. I would probably recommend quarterly.
Quarterly is a good one. That's a really good
You
note.
have to check on that. And I want to harken back to something you said earlier with the will that left the bird and some money just outright to someone. That can be a bad fit. It's very simple. It feels very clean. But here's the problem with that kind of dynamic. Give the bird to
Mm-hmm.
the person, give them the money. There
Yeah.
is absolutely nothing stop them from just taking that bird to a shelter the very next day.
Exactly. I
And
see
then
it
the
all the
money, you
time.
can't get the money back. So that's not a good plan. The money held in suspension in a trust for the benefit of the bird and doled out over time.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why when somebody says that well, this is my mom's bird and she died and I don't want it, and I asked to see the will and testament to making sure that the bird, she didn't have something else in mind for the bird, which is can be problematic in of itself asking for that information, but we've had people do it. So, and we'll of course still take the bird. The sad part though is that the persons did not want that for their bird, and that is not their last wishes. And, you know, and so I feel like we need to make sure we honor that as best as we can as a community, but also as a support network for their animal or for their bird in particular. So, do we have any other questions? In case of an emergency, oh yes, Brett. Yeah, Brett was talking about making sure that, we have contact, we have, um, in case of emergency, of course, we talked about that up front is, making sure the right people know that something's going on with us and it's an emergency, because we've seen that situation a couple of times where a person has gone missing and they call and say, have you heard from her or him? And we don't know, but we feel compelled to go look for the birds because we know she has birds, or she has one of our birds, or he has one of our birds, and so we want to go and make sure that the birds are okay. Of course, we care about the person, the individual, but we don't have rights for HIPAA laws, etc., to knowing, calling up hospitals and saying if they're there. But that's having those directives or those instructions left with somebody, a couple of somebodies, would help alleviate that, right?
Yes, and don't forget those stickers that you
Yeah.
can put in your window so that people know that there are. So if you were missing, the police might come to your house, but they might not go inside unless they had some reason to go there. But if they see a sticker in the window that indicates there's a pet in there alone, they will make provisions for making sure that somebody's going to get in there to care for that pet. Same thing if, your house caught fire while you're not home. Somebody's going to know there's a pet in here we need to rescue.
Right.
So don't forget that. It's a small detail, but it's an important one. And definitely create your network of the call in case of an emergency. So if you've got somebody listed as your healthcare agent, make sure they know how to reach the person who's also the trustee. Provide those two people with contact information so that they can work together if that was necessary for some reason.
Yeah, we as bird people are kind of fanatical about making sure we have something in our wallet that says, don't care about me, just make sure my birds are okay. Contact this person or go to my address and make sure my birds are taken care of. We're kind of fanatical about that because, unfortunately, um, uh, so many things can happen. So many bad things can happen. But anyway, I think we are out of questions. Out of questions, and it is top of the hour. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll do this again with us. Again.
Oh, yes.
Maybe every quarter or so. I won't rope you into it on camera, on TV, but I will be hitting you up again. And of course, I think that it would be lovely if we could actually uh, um, talk to you about ours so we can start doing documentation and kind of get people more acclimated to doing these kinds of things, be more comfortable, answer questions, let them know that this is, it's not somebody just, trying to pry into their business, but support them to making sure that their needs are met. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a really good weekend.
Thank you so much for having me. And I had a really good time. And this is an excellent launch to my weekend.
Thank you.